In this video, we will have a look at Microsoft Entra ID. So this video will serve as a beginner's guide to Entra ID. So it is aimed at bringing yourself up to speed with various features that we have within Entra ID around identity, things like managing users, groups, contacts, devices, licenses, roles, etc. So we'll primarily look at Entra ID using the Entra ID portal that we have. So within the Entra ID portal, we have the identity section within the left-hand pane. So if we expand that one, we have quite few options that we can have within the identity section that we have. So we'll go through all of these one by one, and it will help you to bring yourself up to speed with Entra ID, and you will be much more confident in managing various kind of Entra ID objects, whether they are users, groups, or computers, or contacts, devices, licenses, roles, and all of those sort. So let's get started. So now I have three tabs open over here. So the first one is the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, which is admin.microsoft.com. And that brings the Admin Center pane for us. And if you click on Show All, it will give a list of all the options that we have on the left-hand pane, along with the links for the admin centers for various workloads. Similarly, the second tab that I have is the Entra ID Admin Center. So it's entra.microsoft.com. So again, as you can see, we have the identity section, along with the other ones like protection, identity governance, verified ID, permissions management, and global secure access, which is in a preview. Now we will predominantly look at the identity section over here within the left-hand pane. We have quite few options, and it's going to be a slightly lengthy video than normal. Similarly, the third portal that I have open is the Azure portals, which is portal.azure.com. Now, all these portals can be used for creating various type of objects. Say, for example, if you want to create a new staff in your organization, a new joiner, you could use any of these portals to create that account. Now, depending upon which portal you use, the options that you get might differ from one to the other. But they all use the same backend directory service, which is Entra ID. So irrespective of which portal that you use over here for accomplishing your task, it is going to feed back into the Entra ID directory service, and you will be able to get the same piece of information regardless of which portal you use. So let's get started. So the first option that we have within the Entra ID portal, if we expand identity section, is the Overview tab. So let's click on Overview, and it gives us some information in the middle pane regarding the tenant that we have. So the first name is the name of the tenant, which is Cloudific Training in my case. The tenant ID is this large GUID that we have. We can copy it across. You can copy it to a clipboard if you need the tenant ID. This is a unique identifier for your tenant. So another company or another tenant will have a completely different tenant ID. So I'm using a test tenant over here. So this is my tenant ID. And it gives the primary domain that we have. So the domain that I have is cloudific.training. This is a custom domain. It's not the one that comes out of the box. So when you do sign up for a Microsoft 365 tenant, you will have the tenant domain as something that you specify. So something.onmicrosoft.com. So the onmicrosoft.com part is static. So that doesn't change, but you can have a prefix depending upon whether it is available or not. So if your company name is, say, for example, Microsoft, you might have your primary domain tenant as microsoft.onmicrosoft.com. So if it is a different company, say, for example, MasterCard, so it will be mastercard.onmicrosoft.com. You can give any name that you want, but most of the time you try and stick a name which is similar to your organization name or the same name as your organization, if it is not taken. So that's the primary domain. Then the license that I have currently is Microsoft Entra ID P2. So Microsoft Entra ID has 4 licenses, and of which the 3 of them are the important ones. So we have the free one, Microsoft Entra ID free version, which doesn't have any payment options for it. So as long as you spin up a Microsoft 365 tenant, it comes with a basic free license, which is Microsoft Entra ID free. Then we have an Entra ID P1 and P2 plan. So plan 1 and plan 2. So depending upon which one you go for, the features that you get will differ. So plan 2 will have everything in plan 1, while plan 2 will have something extra on top of the plan 1 feature set. It gives you also on the middle pane the number of users that I have in the tenant currently, number of groups and applications, and the devices. So it gives you a snapshot or a basic information regarding how your tenant looks like. Now, if I click on the monitoring tab, it gives you the sign-in patterns into your tenant. So the number of sign-ins over a period of time, and it gives you a graphical representation as to how your sign-in flow looks like. So there it is. So it looks like over the May 14th to May 22, we have a lot of sign-ins, and we can then further dig down if you want to. Now, if you click on properties, it gives you information regarding your country as to where your tenant is hosted. So this is United Kingdom, and the data location is within the EU. So the data center that this particular tenant will reside on will be a region within the EU. And the notification language is English. You can change that. You can change the name of your organization over here, and then that will get reflected in all the other portals. Technical contact, email address of mine for this particular tenant, so regit@cloudfig.training. All the other values are optional. So the global privacy contact, privacy statement URL, they are all optional fields. Now, access management for Azure resources. So this account that I have, regit@cloudfig.training, is a global admin account. So this is the type of account that has full rights onto the Microsoft 365 tenant. So it is a role within Microsoft 365 called Global Administrator. So if you add any users, or if you give permissions by adding the user to the Global Administrator role, they will have full control on the tenant. So what it is saying is that it can manage, this particular account can manage access to all Azure subscriptions and management groups in this tenant. So that's more of a information. And you can flip the switch and say you want to have it on the Azure side as well. Now, security defaults is something that comes from Microsoft as a security mechanism for tenants that has been newly created, or tenants that doesn't have any conditional access policies. So what it does is, if you click on the Manage Security Default option, by default, it is disabled. So what it is saying is that there is no conditional access policy or MFA prompts for any user accounts on this tenant. There's no legacy authentication being blocked. So there are a few things that comes out of the box if you do turn on, or if you enable security defaults. Now, keep in mind, if you do have conditional access policies currently in place in the tenant, and if you enable security defaults, it's going to disable all those policies. So the conditional access policies that you have configured will be just negated, and the policies from Microsoft will take effect. And those are just the basic ones. They are not detailed enough, like conditional access policies. So those will enforce MFA, those will disable legacy authentication, those kind of things. And if you click save, security defaults will be triggered, and the next time the user logs in, they will be asked to configure MFA or satisfy MFA before they can log into the portal. So let's cancel that out for the time being, but it is highly recommended to keep security defaults on if you don't have any intention to use conditional access policies. Now, we have a few recommendations over here. So the recommendations will bring up something called the Identity Secure Score. So currently it says 16.67%, which is very low. So it is a score that is given to the identity section within this tenant based on 0 being the least and 100 being the maximum. It gives you as to where you stand regarding the security posture of this Microsoft 365 tenant from an identity perspective. Now, 16% is very low, and Microsoft gives the recommendations as to what needs to be done to improve the score and to make your tenant more secure. So we have things like require multi-factor authentication for admin roles. So if I enable that particular option, if I set that up, then I get 10 secure points. So my point will go from 16 to 26. So similarly, I can go with the high-end ones first, which is more security impactful, so that we can get them out of the park and then make our score better and secure our tenant. So you could have enable policy to block legacy authentication. So that gives us 8 points. Do not expire passwords gives us 8 points, but that's kind of up for debate. So Microsoft recommends not to expire passwords in Microsoft Entra ID as a secure mechanism, because if you do ask your users to change their passwords every 30 days, they might just go for the same combination, so whatever password that they currently have, and they just keep changing the numbers at the end so that it is easy for remembering. But what Microsoft says is get the users to go for a very complex password, maybe 12 characters, 14 characters, and then not to expire the password. So they have the password which is complex enough, and since they're going to stick with the same password, there is more chance that they will remember the password and not write it down in a post-it note and stick it on the monitor. So that's again up for debate. So depending upon the organization, you might go for not expiring passwords, or you might have policies which kind of stipulates that the passwords has to be regularly changed. So that's up to you. So this identity secure score has to be improved depending upon the recommendations that we have. That is an important step that we need to take, especially things like enabling, enforcing MFA for all administrator roles and for users, and blocking legacy authentication. That kind of improves the security process straight away. All right, so let's go into the overview tab again. So we have gone through all the options that we have. Now let's click at users, and let's go into all users with the left-hand pane. So here it gives you a list of all the user accounts that we currently have in the Microsoft 365 tenant. So I do have few users, and most of them are related or somehow the names of characters from the popular sitcom series Friends. So I'm a big fan of Friends. So we have Chandler Bing, Joy Tribbiani, and Ross Geller over here. So we'll start creating more accounts, maybe Monica Geller, Rachel Green, and Phoebe Buffet. So in order to create a user account within the Microsoft Entra ID portal, so we click on New Users over here. So you have the option in the middle pane. Click on the drop-down option and say Create New User. Now the second option that we have, Invite External Users, is for creating guest accounts or collaborating with external users who are outside your company, who has an email address or a UPN completely different to what we have inside the organization. So the current domain that I have is cloudific.training. So if you go for inviting external user accounts, they will have an email address or a UPN which is completely separate than cloudific.training. So let's create a new user within the company. So let's click on New User. Let's give it a name. So this is user principal name. So let's go for Monica Geller. So you can go for either monica.geller, for example, or you can just put it together, depending upon the conventions that you have within the company. And you can drop down and pick a different domain that you have. I only have one routable domain at the moment. This is the default one that comes out of the box when you create the tenant. Although you can send emails to that, it's better to have a branded domain. If you have multiple domains within your tenant, you can select the one that you want to have. So let's stick with cloudific.training. The mail nickname is automatically generated from the user principal name. You can uncheck that box, and if you want to change it to something different, like M. Geller, you can do that. But I'm just sticking with Monica Geller, which is good enough. Now the display name is Monica Geller, and the password is automatically generated if you check this box which says auto-generate password. You can copy the password that you have. You used to be able to see the password as well over here, but that's been taken off. So everything that we see over here gets changed on a regular basis. The look and feel of the various workflows that we have within the portal gets changed very frequently. Now, if you want to have the account enabled, you can check the box over here. It is checked by default. But if you are kind of creating the accounts well in advance, say for example, you have a new starter next month, you don't want to have the account enabled from the get-go. So while you're creating the account, so we can keep the account as disabled, and when the user starts, we can enable the account. But I'll keep it enabled for the time being. Let's click on Next for the properties. So here we can fill in the properties of the user object. So this is similar to the fields that you are familiar with the Active Directory world. So whenever you create a new user in AD, you get the first name, last name, you fill in all the details, title, company name. Although these are optional fields, it is always advisable to fill most of the information that you can, because it gives a good directory. Now, if you have some kind of an HR system in which you have new starter details coming up, either by a CSV file or you have some kind of an integration with Entra ID, all these fields will be automatically filled in, and that makes our life much more easier. But here we are manually creating the account, so let's go for Monica Geller. That's the first name and the last name. User type is a member, which means it is a standard user within the organization, within this particular tenant. If you say guest, it's an external user. So let's stick with member. And authorization info, if you are using any certificates for this particular user, you can go for that, but we are not using any certificates at the moment. Let's go for job title. Let's say IT manager, for example. And company name is Cloudific. And department is IT. Employee ID is 12345. I mean, these are all optional values. You can fill them in if you want to, or you can leave them as well. You can give a manager for this particular user if you want to have that line of chain being enabled within the directory service. We can give in the address and fax numbers, parental controls. These are for minors. Now, one of the options that we have to set is the usage location. So this is the country in which the user will reside or the user data will reside. So we are based in the United Kingdom, so we'll go for UK. But if you have the user in a different location and you're a global company, you can pick a different location, say for example, the US, if the user is US based. So it kind of lights up the user and the associated data in a data center which is much more local to the region where the user is working from. But this is a mandatory field, although it is not selected as a mandatory field over here. If you don't fill the usage location and go through the wizard and create the account, when it comes to the license assignment, it will create problems for you. So you have to have a usage location. Now let's click on next and click on assignments. So we have three options: adding administrative unit. This is again delegating control over a small subset of users, but we are creating a standard account, so we're not going for any kind of admin management over here. So we'll just leave that. If you want to make this particular user a member of a particular group, you can just add the group over here. Let's say IT team, for example. Let's select that. And if you want to give this account any role in the organization, like admin roles within the organization, you can set that up. So you have a lot of roles being listed over here. These are all out-of-the-box roles in the Microsoft 365 tenant provided by Microsoft. And as I mentioned, global administrator is like enterprise admin in the AD world, or domain admin in the AD world. You could give, or you could manage the entire tenant by using the global administrator role. So this is the one that we have. It says can manage all aspects of Microsoft Entra ID and Microsoft services that use Microsoft Entra identities. So that's the equivalent of domain/enterprise admin in the AD world, so global administrator. But while creating normal user accounts, it is always advisable not to give any roles. The reason is that you don't want to have the normal user account also to have global admin rights, because you have just one account who is using Outlook and all of the consumer-based applications or company organization-wide applications by using a laptop, and also to have such a powerful role as global admin. It's always advisable to create a separate admin role or an admin user account for the user for administrative purposes. And whenever you create a user account for administrative purposes, there is no requirement to give any kind of Microsoft 365 license. So you can create an admin role and give it global admin rights without assigning any license. But if you want to have much more advanced managements like PIM, privileged identity management, and all of those, you need to have extra licenses assigned just for that. But if you want to have just accounts with admin rights, you don't need any kind of license for it. So we don't need any roles. So let's close that pane off and let's click on next. So it gives you a summary of what you have done so far. So the user principal name is Monica Geller at cloudific.training, the display names, the password, account is enabled, and all the options that we have selected so far. And let's click on create. So it creates the user account, and let's click on the refresh button, and it should list Monica Geller over here. So this is the manual way of creating a user account one by one. But if you have quite a few user accounts, say for example, you have 10 or 15 users starting on the same day, and you get a list from the HR in a CSV format, you can bulk import those user accounts over here. So if you go into bulk operations and go down and select bulk create, you can download a CSV template. So let's download that and let's open it up. So it gives you a format as to what it expects when you want to fill in those details. So it gives you an example. So name is the full name of the user. Say, for example, in my case, Monica Geller. You can give a username. You can give in a password, whether you want to block sign in or not, whether the account is enabled or not. First name, last name, and you fill in all those options that you want. So you can have, say, for example, 10 of those filled in. Save the CSV file, and you can then bulk import the CSV file, which will create those user accounts. So you can upload the CSV file over here. Now we don't have anything yet. It's not valid because it doesn't have anything in it. It's not in the correct format. There are no rows to process. That's the main thing. So once you have filled in all the details and once you have taken off all the examples and cleaned it up, then you can click submit and it will go through the process of provisioning those user accounts. So that's the bulk creation part. Let's close that off. Now let's create another account by using the Entra ID portal, the admin portal that we have within the Microsoft 365. So admin.microsoft.com. So if we come into users and if I click on active users, the reason why I want to use this particular portal is that the look and feel and the options that we have is slightly different to the Entra ID one. So let's create one over here. Let's click on add a user. Here it's much more clean in my opinion. So it is asking for the first name and the last name. So let's go for Rachel Green. Display name is automatically filled in. Username is Rachel Green at cloudific.training. You can ask it to automatically create the password, require this user to change their password when they first sign in. That option was not enabled in the Entra ID one, but we don't want that. But if you do want, you can stick that in. You also have the option to send the password in an email upon completion. So you can send this particular password for this user that you're creating to a different email address. Say, for example, you are the administrator, so Rajit at cloudifig.training, you can get the system to automatically send the information regarding the username and the password for the users that you are creating so that you can hand it over to the user and then force the user to change the password at the first logon. So it's much more secure. So I could send that email. Let's click on next. Now it is forcing to select a location. So you can see the red star over there. So this is the user's location, which is enforced in this particular portal, whereas it wasn't the case in the Entra ID. I'm sure Microsoft will keep changing these things and then get the same look and feel, or at least the same kind of workflows in all the portals. But for the time being, things are slightly different when we try and create user accounts using the various portals. But they all get created in the same Entra ID directory service. So let's stick with the United Kingdom. Assign a user a product license. We never had the option of assigning a product license when we created the user using Entra ID. We have to go in and then make that change. But over here, you're prompted to have a license. Or you can say that you want to create a user account without a product license. This is only recommended if you are creating a user account for administrative functions alone. But if you're creating a user account, you want to have some kind of license so they can start using the workloads that we have in Microsoft 365, like using their mailbox or Teams or Yammer or SharePoint. So let's stick with E5. So I have Microsoft 365 E5, 19 of them available. So let's check that box. And I also want to give them Teams because the first one doesn't have Teams. Now you can drill down and see what kind of applications are lit up by these two licenses SKUs. So if I expand this one, I can pick and choose. If I don't want to have customer logbooks, for example, I can just take them off. So it is granular to that extent in which you can select each of the workloads or the service or the functions, and then you can assign it the correct way. So as I told you before, there's two types of Microsoft Entra ID license, P1 and P2. So since we have P2, we have both P2 and P1 assigned. If it is just the P1 license that you have, you'll only have P1 over here. So you have a list of all the applications that is coming as part of this particular license queue. So we have 94 of them. And again, you can select all, or you can just pick and choose as to what we want for this particular user. Say, for example, you don't want to have Yammer yet in your organization. So by selecting 365 E5, you will have Yammer lit up for the user. And you can go ahead and make that particular change over here by saying that I don't want to have Yammer yet for this particular user. Let's scroll down, and you can pick and choose the Yammer or any other ones for that matter. Say, for example, if you don't want to have Sway or To Do or Universal Print or Viva, you can just pick and choose as to what you want and what you don't want. So if you don't want Yammer Enterprise, you can take it off. I'll stick it in for the time being. Let's click on next. Here we are being prompted whether you want to have any user admin roles for this particular user. By default, it is just a user account, no admin sender access. So there's no admin access for this particular user. But if you do want to have, you can click on the admin sender access role and then select the out-of-the-box roles that we have, maybe a global reader, which is just read access to the entire tenant that we have. Similar to global administrator, but global reader you can only read information regarding what is given to a global administrator, whereas a global admin can make changes. But again, as recommended, you shouldn't have admin rights for a normal user account. So let's just stick with the new user and let's click on next. So here we get a summary of what we have done so far around this user account creation. Let's click on finish adding and we'll add that particular user. So here it says you can't assign licenses that contain these conflicting services. So you have Skype for Business, review the licenses. So let's have a look at the licenses. Let's click on that. Let's fix that one, click next and finish adding. So here it gives a snapshot of the main details that we need for the user to log in. So the username is Rachel Green at cloudifig.training. You can see the password if you create the user account from the 365 admin center. So you can click on show and it will give you the initial password. But we have forced the user to change the password at the first logon, so that is okay. And the password will also be sent to this particular email address, which is good. And now let's click on close. So now if we click on refresh, we should have both the accounts so far. So the one that was created by using the Entra ID and the one by using the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So we have Rachel Green over here and Monica Gala. So both of them are present. And as you can see, the first user that we created by using the Entra ID doesn't have a license assigned. So we can click on it and we can assign a license from here. Let's click the user and wait for the properties pane to load. We can go into licenses and apps. And we can just assign that one of the licenses. Say, for example, Microsoft 365 E5, you can assign that and save changes, and that will light up the license for that particular user. Similarly, you can always go into the same Entra ID portal, refresh, you will get the same list of users over there. So you have both Rachel and Monica. So let's click on that user that we created using the Entra ID admin center, which is Monica Gala, and you can go into the licenses option and you can assign a license from here. So you can click on assignments and you can say Microsoft 365 E5. And as you can see, you get the whole option that is covered by the E5 SKU, and then you can pick and choose as to what you want to be lit up. Say, for example, if you don't want to have avatars for Teams, you can take it off. You get the idea. And click on save so that the license assignment is succeeded. And let's go back to the users within the Entra ID portal. Let's click on refresh. And a few things to note is that all the user types that we have over here are members, which means these are all the accounts that are currently present in the tenant. We don't have any guest accounts yet. And all of them are cloud accounts, which means they are not synchronized from on-premise Active Directory. And the reason why I say that is it is shown as no for all on-premise sync enabled. So we're not syncing any user accounts from on-premise Active Directory up into the cloud by using Entra ID Connect or Entra ID Cloud Sync. And the last time the password was changed for this particular user and whether the account is enabled or not. Now let's look at the other tabs that we have in the middle pane as far as the users are concerned. So if you click on audit logs, it gives you a list of everything, all the audit logs regarding the users. So changing user license, which we have just done for Monica Gala. So as you can see, if you expand that one, you can see that the activity type was changing the user license over here. And the user that we changed was for Monica Gala. And the account that was used is my admin account. You have additional details as to what has been done. And you have the targets, which is the UPN of the user on which the change was made, and the ID of the user. The modified properties will be listed as well if it is any property values that was listed and that was changed. Say, for example, we changed the value of an attribute from one to the other. Say, for example, the user was created in the department IT and then we changed it to sales. Any of those ones, old value, new value combinations will be listed over here. But here we just changed the user license. So that's been recorded and that comes as part of the audit logs. Similarly, you can see everything that we have done so far in the last 1 month. You can change the time span and just go for last 7 days, 24 hours, and you can go for a custom interval as well. And you can also download the entire file into a CSV format. So if you want to have it as a CSV or as a JSON, you can download the audit logs into a CSV and then you can analyze it later on, or you can share it with the team. And you just have to make sense of all the values that we have. So let's close the CSV file. Don't save that one. Let's get it out of the way. Now, if you click on sign-in logs, it's the same case. You'll get the same log information regarding the sign-ins of the user in this particular tenant. So for the last days currently being selected, and you can again change to last month, last 24 hours, and the custom interval. So it gives you all the user information regarding the user IDs that's been used, the application. So my account was used for the Azure portal and also for the Office 365 portal. And the status was a success. I successfully signed in. This is the IP address that I was using. There was no conditional access policy. It was a single factor authentication, no MFA. So it gives you a list of everything that has been going on from a sign-in perspective for all the accounts that we have in the tenant. Now, diagnose and solve problems. Again, that's a help, self-help page in which you can diagnose and get some guidance from Microsoft. Now, if you click on deleted users, you will see a list of all the user accounts that has been deleted. We don't have any accounts that we have deleted so far, but any accounts that get deleted will be kept in here for 30 days. And after the 30 days, the user accounts will be permanently deleted and there is no way of getting it back. And if you want to have that account, then you have to create a new account for that particular user. It won't be the same, but at least the user will have an account to start working again. So let's try and see how we can create and delete an account. So we have created 2 accounts. Let's click on Monica Geller. And if you want to delete this particular user, let's say, for example, the user has left the company, you get the go ahead from the HR, and you can click on delete, and it will give us a prompt whether are you sure you want to delete. And if you click on OK, it will remove the user from the active list. And if you click refresh, Monica Geller has been gone from here, has been taken off. And if you go into deleted users, you will find that particular account over there. And this account will remain over here for 30 days. So as it says over here, the deletion date is today, June the 6th, and permanent deletion date is July the 6th. So exactly 30 days after you have deleted the account, it will be permanently deleted if you don't do anything with it. Now, if you made a mistake and you want to restore the account, you can easily click on the account that we have, select the account and say restore users. And you say okay to that, and the user will be moved back to all the users list, and the user account will be there once we refresh. So there it is, the user account is now active again. Now, password reset. This is enabling the users to reset their password on their own, so self-service password reset. So if you want to have this feature enabled, by which the user can reset their own password without calling the help desk, you can either go with selected, and you can select a group of users on which you want to have this particular option enabled, or you can just say all. Now, if you say all or group, it doesn't matter, but you have to configure the registration and notification methods over here. So let's click OK to that. Now, within notifications, we are saying notify users on password resets. Stick it to yes, because if a password reset has been done on a particular user account, the user should know about it, at least so that if it has not been triggered by them, or if they are not aware of that, then they can call the help desk and say that an account has been reset, the password has been reset, and it's not me, and then the guys can take it from there. The second option that we have is notify all admins when other admins reset their password. You could stick it to yes if you do want to, or go with no. It's entirely up to you. But keep this one as yes. And if it is set to no, flip it to yes and save the option. Now, registration is one in which you are requiring your users to register when they are signing in. So you're registering for MFA. So we say yes to that. Number of days before users are asked to reconfirm their authentication information is 180 days, so half the year. So in 6 months' time, users will be prompted to reconfirm their authentication details. If you want to have a lengthier period, you can change it to 365, or if you want to have, say, 3 months, you can go for that. So we have any value from 0 to 730, so 0 to 2 years. So 180 sounds good, so let's keep 180. Now, authentication methods specifies the number of methods required for the password reset. So if we are going with the password reset over here by saying all and clicking save, we have to select the authentication methods. So this is a mechanism by which we are kind of confirming the user is who they say they are when they are trying to reset their password, because we don't want any user or anyone else outside the organization who just know your UPN details or your email address to be able to reset your password. So once you say that you want to reset the password, you want to confirm that you're the right user to the system. So the system will ask either for an email, as it is shown over here, or it will ask for a mobile phone on an SMS, or you can go for a mobile notification. So let's go for email and mobile app code. You can also go for a set of security questions. So while registering over here by using the third option that we saw, we can ask the users to register up to 5 answers for 5 questions. And then we can prompt 3 questions while they're trying to reset the password. Let's go for 3 over here. Let's go for 5 and then pick a random 3. And you can select all the questions that you want to have. So no security questions configured. Let's go for predefined questions, or you can go for your own customized questions. So things like what we have are very used to when we try and do these kind of things in other platforms. So you could say, in what city your parents met? That's one personal question. What city was your first job? Your favorite food, for example. Youngest sibling's middle name, or what school did you attend? Because if you don't have siblings, then that will be difficult. And let's go for your childhood hero. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. Click OK to that. So we are prompting all these questions to be answered while they register. And we randomly ask 3 questions while they are trying to reset their password. And if they give the correct answers, then we are confirming, or the system is confirming that it is the right user who is trying to reset the password, and it will reset the password depending upon the inputs given by the user. So let's click on OK to that. So we have one authentication method, either security questions or an email or a mobile app code. So let's click save. And that's been set. So we have the registration done. And we reinforce this one every 180 days. We have the authentication methods configured. We have the notifications being set. And on customization, this is all about whether you want to have a customized link while they are trying. So it designates whether or not the contact your administrator link that normally allows users to contact an admin directly is overridden to point to a custom location. So if you want to have a customized URL, say for example, if you have your company page like clarific.com/helpdesk or something, when which you give out all the details, you can click on yes, and then you can enter that URL over here, which will get displayed to the users. So let's click discard because I don't have any URL at the moment. We don't have any on-premise integration at the moment. If you do have any integrations with on-prem Active Directory, then you can configure the options over there. And similarly, within the activity, you have audit logs, as we have seen. So this is all about audit logs regarding the directory. We don't have anything at the moment. Usage and insights, it gives you, again, the insights and usage of your tenant and the workloads. So users registered by the authentication methods, it's Microsoft Authenticator predominantly. We have Windows Hello for Business as well for one user. And it gives you a snapshot over the years or over the months. Users capable of self-service password reset is 2 out of the 6. Who are capable of passwordless authentication, only 1. So it gives you a snapshot of how the user base looks like as to utilizing the various workloads around identity, whether they can have MFA, whether they can have passwordless authentication being enabled. So it gives you a snapshot of how things look like in the last 7 days, for example, over here. You could flip it to last 1 month and get a different view if you do have a different view coming up. But in my case, since it is a test run, we have pretty much the same number of users, so only 6 accounts in total. So that's everything regarding the users. So if you go into all users as usual, we have gone through all the options. Deleted users, it straight away takes to the deleted users option within the all users pane that we have. And user settings, that is one option that you have to configure. So there's few options that you would like to configure so that we can make our tenant a bit more secure. So the first one that we have is users can register applications. Ideally, we don't want users to register applications, so we say no. Restrict non-admin users from creating tenants. Again, that should be yes in most of the cases, unless you want your users to start creating tenants. Users can create security groups. Ideally, no, because if you start allowing users to create security groups, you'll soon get a lot of groups that goes kind of out of control. Although you can have group policies and naming convention policies to kind of restrict the way things should be created, it is highly unlikely that you will be asking your users to create their own security groups. But if you do want to allow that, you can flip the switch and say yes over here, but I'm sticking with no. The next section is about guest user access, the one that we are yet to see within the users. So here we are saying what kind of restrictions should we have for our guest users. So the default option is guest users have limited access to the properties and memberships of directory objects. So that is kind of in the middle. You could go for most inclusive, in which it has the same level of access as members. I highly won't recommend that. And the other one is the most restrictive, which is possibly the one that I will go with. Guest user access is restricted to the properties and memberships of their own directory objects. Now, the next option that we have within Administrative Sender is restrict access to Microsoft Entra Admin Sender. You want, so what it says over here, so if you click on the I, it says switch to prevent users from misconfiguring the resources that they own from Microsoft Entra Admin Center. So this is more of a security measure. So we need to say yes over here. So because you don't want to have users gaining access to the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, even though they are a owner of a particular group. So we just want the portals to be for administrators alone. So we flip that to yes. Now LinkedIn connections, allowing users to connect their work or school account with LinkedIn, it's entirely up to you. Yes is not bad. But if you're more restrictive, then you can click with go with no option. Or if you want to have that option enabled for a select group, maybe for the directors and the senior management who wants to have that for whatever reason, you can select the group and then pick a group and go from there. So let's stick with yes. Now show keep user signed in. So this is the option that you get where when you try and log in to the M365 workloads by using the browser. And you get the option once you have put in the username and the password, you have satisfied the MFA, you get a prompt in which it asks you whether you want to keep your session signed in. And if you want to show that particular option, you can just say yes over here. If you don't want that to be provided to the user as an option, you can flip no. So let's stick with yes over here. Then we have a few options for managing external collaboration settings. This is again for guest users. It's the same one that we have seen over here, at least the first one. So we go with most restrictive over here. Now, guest invite restrictions. It says anyone in the organization can invite guest users, including guests and non-admins. So that's the most inclusive, which means anyone can do anything they want around guest invitations. Now, we might want to go with only users assigned to specific admin roles can invite guest users. That might be a bit more controlled way of doing things. Again, we have the various options over here. You can pick and choose the one that suit your business needs. Now, enable guest self-service sign-up via user workflows. So to know, that's ideal. We don't want self-service guest sign-ups. Now, external user leave settings. So allow external users to remove themselves from your organization. That is recommended. So if you have external users and they have finished with your organization with whatever partnerships that they had or whatever work they were supposed to do, maybe you're bringing in partners for a specific small project that you have going on for a couple of months, and they want to disassociate with this particular tenant, you can just let them do that. So let's say yes to that. Collaborative restrictions. Cross-tenant access settings are also evaluated when sending an invitation to determine whether the invitation should be allowed or blocked. So this is about whether you want to have the option of sending the invitations to any domain, or whether you want to have a specific domains that you are really allowing, or whether you want to have it as allowing only from a set of domains that is allowed. And you can specify the target domains over here. You can just say maybe Microsoft.com, gmail.com, not Gmail, Microsoft.com, or your partner companies. So for example, if you're working with HP, for example, so HP.com. If you're working with some other practices, consultancy practices, maybe say, for example, Cloudific, you can put in Cloudific, and you can say these are the only domains in which we are allowing invitations to be sent out. Or you can just even use the opposite of that and say deny invitations to certain domains and allow for everything else. Now, let's stick with all for the time being. Let's click Save. So this is everything to do with user settings. And now let's go back into users, all users, and try and create a guest account. That is something that we kind of got left off. So click on users over here, and we say invite external user. So this is the scenario in which you are trying to invite a partner company, for example, to gain access to your Microsoft 365 tenant, or you have genuine guest coming in for like a week or so, trying to attend some meetings or workshops, whatever the case may be. So here, the email address that you provide will be an external one. For example, I might say Regit@cloudific.com, and display name is Regit, and send the invitation, and you can give in a message saying that, hey, Regit, please accept the invite, something along those lines. You can CC your account if you want to, so that you get a copy of the invitation that is going out. So let me do that. And invite redirect URL, so that's been pre-filled in by Microsoft. Now let's click on next. You can give in a few more additional properties for this particular guest user, so that your directory has a full structure. So let's go with Regit. It's a guest account, so it is not a member. It is a guest account. Now job title is, let's say, consultant. Company is Cloudific. So that's an external company. You can fill in all those other details. Let's go down and say usage location is United Kingdom. Stuck in Italy. Let's just go down and select UK. If your partner is in a different company, go with that one. But I'm based in the UK, so I'm just going with that option. Let's click on next. And you can again add the account into a group, for example, maybe an IT group or some kind of a group that you have created for your project, say, for example, Intune POC, for example. And you can also assign a role if you want for that particular user. Maybe you want to have global reader access, so they have read access to everything within your tenant. And maybe you have hired them for kind of getting an idea as to how your Microsoft tenant looks like, and maybe to improve the security posture. So you don't want to give them access to make changes yet. You just want to give them reader access so that they can have a look around and see as to how things are configured. So maybe global reader and maybe security reader is a good enough example in those cases. So let's select those. Click next, and here we get a snapshot of what we have done so far, just a review of what we are trying to do, and let's click on invite. So the user invitation is in progress. It fires an email to that particular account that we have specified. And you also get an email, which is going out because you have CC'd. Now, let's click refresh. And here we have that account that we have created, the guest account, so Rajit. And the user principal name, as you can see, is a different one. So, Rajit_cloudific.com/ blah, blah, blah. And the user type is guest. And it is not an on-premise one. It is not synced from on-prem, which is set to no. The last password change, it was only created today. So it's the same account is enabled. So this is how we create everything regarding user accounts. So creating user accounts using various portals, and also creating a user, managing a user, deleting a user, and restoring a user, and also setting the various options for password resets, the user settings as to what user can do and what can't do, and around guest access and guest invitations. Now that we have seen everything regarding users, let's go into groups on the left-hand pane. So let's expand the groups section that we have within the identity pane, and let's click on all groups. So it lists all the groups that we currently have in the tenant. So I have some groups over here. Now, if you want to create a new group, we click on new group, and it will ask you to create a group of a particular type. So we have two group types. So if we expand or drop down, we have two types of groups that we can create from the Entra ID portal. One is a security group, which is the traditional security group that we are used to in the Active Directory world. And the second one is a Microsoft 365 group, which is a collaboration group. So when you create a Microsoft 365 group, it also lights up behind the scenes a team site, SharePoint. It gives a OneDrive, it gives notebooks. So it's a collaborative feature bringing teams and users together. So that is a modern group that we have within Microsoft 365, and the security group is a traditional one. Now, the key difference between the two is that the security group doesn't come with any collaborative features. It is just a traditional group that we have, which is focused on giving access to a particular resource. And you can have, if you select a security group, you can have the membership type as assigned, which is manually assigning the users into that particular group, or you can have a dynamic user or a dynamic device. Now, the dynamic users and devices are in which we create a dynamic query, and it kind of automatically picks up the users based on the logic that we give. Now, security group can also have users and devices. So you can have both of those or just have one of those types. So you can have the members as just the users or just the devices, or you can have both of them mixed together. Everything is fine. But when we go with Microsoft 365, we cannot have devices in it. So the only options that we have for the membership type is either assigned or a dynamic user. So that's the key difference. And again, the security group doesn't have any of those collaborative features. It doesn't light up Teams and SharePoint and other workloads like OneDrive and notebooks behind the scenes. Whereas when you go for a Microsoft 365, it does bring in all those workloads together and give us a proper enriched Microsoft 365 experience. So now let's select security for the time being. Let's create a security group, and we need to give it a name. So let's go with HR, for example. And now it is asking whether you want to assign any roles to this particular group. So if you say yes to that, the role section comes up, and you can just say, what role do you want to have this particular group? So for example, you can create a group called, say, global admins, and then select the role over here as global administrator, and put the users into this particular group. And then that way we can give permissions to the Microsoft 365 tenant. So that's one way of doing it if you do want to go for roles. But if it is purely for a security group, then let's create a group called HR, for example. Let's say no to that. Now the membership type is either assigned, dynamic user, or dynamic device. So let's quickly create an assigned rule, an assigned group, So for that, we need to select an owner. It's always advisable to have an owner for this particular type of groups, or any groups for that matter. Now let's pick myself as the owner, and I can assign a couple of users for this particular security group. So for example, if I go down and if I look for, now it's bringing up all the groups, all the members that I have. So let's just search for users over here. And let's say Chanlabing, Joy Triani, and Rose Gala, for example. And that's all what we need. A description will be ideal, so you can give in as to what the purpose of this particular group is all about. So that's optional. So let's click on create. So we're just creating a basic security group within Microsoft 365 tenant called HR. So if you click refresh, it should bring up the HR group that we have created. There it is. So if you click on that one, You get all the properties as to the membership type is assigned. It's a cloud group. So it's purely in the cloud. It is not synchronized from on-premise. It has one owner and it has 3 members at the moment. So you can view them, you can make changes. So you can get the same options over here. So if you click on members, it gives you all the options. You can add the members, you can remove them. You can give the owners, again, roles and administrator rights. If you want to give them administrative rights for this particular group, you can give that. At the moment, we don't have anything, so there's nothing listed over here. You can assign licenses if you want to have. So you can have groups for licenses, and you can have an assignment over here, and you can click and say you want to have, say, something HR related kind of softwares for this particular group if you want to. So you can get creative in that way as well. Now let's go back into all the groups and let's create a new Microsoft 365 security group. But this time we'll go for, let's say, HR, let's say IT users, for example. And let's go for dynamic user. And now pick my account as the owner, for example. And here we are trying to construct a dynamic query to pick up the users. So we're not assigning the members manually and giving a list of the static list of users that is member of this particular group. Instead, we are creating a query which runs in the background and Microsoft 365 picks based on the logic that we have provided. So if I click on add dynamic query, let me try and construct a query saying, okay, choose a property. If the user department is equal to IT, that is one condition, and we can just go with one condition if you want. So it says the rule syntax is user.department equals IT. Now, let me just quickly go back to portal. Let's click on users. It's much more easier to bring up the details over there. Monica Geller. And let's click on edit properties. And let's say job information. Department is IT. So Monica Geller should be part of this particular group when the query runs. And we can also say if the company title has something like IT. So both of them are suitable over here for Monica. So let's cancel out of it. And let's go back to the dynamic rule. We could also add one more expression and say department is equal to IT, or maybe the job title, let's say, starts with IT. So what we are saying is, if there is a user account within this Microsoft 365 tenant whose department is stamped as IT, or if the job title has a value starting with IT, then that particular user should be part of this dynamic group. So let's click on save and let's create the user. Now the dynamic query doesn't run all the time. It takes Microsoft 365 a bit of time to create the membership assignment. And whenever you make changes to the users, it doesn't get reflected straight away because the query runs on a periodic basis, but it will get picked up eventually and the dynamic membership will be created. So let's come back to that in a minute to see that the account has been taken effect. Now let's click on new group again. Let's create a Microsoft 365 group. Let's give it a name called sales. That is already there. So let's go for marketing, or let's say finance team. Finance. And let's give it a name, finance. We don't want to give any roles. We can assign dynamic assignment, static assignment in this case. So we can pick the owner and we pick my account in this instance, and we can assign the users one by one. So that's a static way of configuring the Microsoft 365 group. Or we can go with a dynamic membership. So in which we say dynamic user, and we construct the query by saying that if the user is in, say, country equals United Kingdom, we can validate the query. Let's validate the rules and add a user to see whether the correct query is being constructed. Let's pick Monica Geller. So United Kingdom, that is the right one. So the user.country equals United Kingdom. So this is pretty much picking up all the users that I have in this particular tenant. Now, if that is what we want, so we can go with that. So the dynamic membership is everyone in this Microsoft 365 tenant whose country is equal to United Kingdom, or the usage location is set as UK. So let's click on save. So we are picking up everyone in UK. So let's say UK finance team, finance UK, UK finance team. So that's the team in the UK. So if you are a global company and if you have a finance team in the US, you can create another one, have a different query altogether, or you can go with a different query to create the dynamic membership. But anyway, let's create on particular group by clicking the create button. And now the account or the group has been created. So let's go back and have a look at the group that we created before, the one with dynamic membership. So we can see the membership type as assigned or dynamic over here. So this is the dynamic one that we have created. So let's click on IT users and see whether the membership has been populated. So it says there are 2 members. So if I click on the members, let's see who the users are. So we have Monica Geller and John Smith. So apparently John Smith also has the department as IT, or it has a job title starting with IT. So it has picked up both the users. And when any of these condition changes, maybe for example, Monica Geller changes the department from IT to marketing, for example, it automatically drops the user from this particular group membership automatically. So that's the beauty of having dynamic groups. And it is quite powerful. So let's go back into groups, all groups. And let's also pick the other dynamic group that we have created. So that's the UK finance team. Let's see whether we have any users in it yet. Click on members. There it is, Monica Geller and John Smith again. We have the same options. Let's click on the membership rules. And these users are part of United Kingdom. So let's go with that. Now let's go back into all groups. And let's try and delete a group that we have created so far. So let's delete the HR group. Click on delete and let's click OK to that. It will be moved to the deleted groups option. Let's click refresh. Sometimes it takes a bit of time for the move to happen. All right, let's come back to the deleted groups in a bit. Let's look at group settings. Now here we have a few options corresponding to the user ones. We have a few options that we need to select yes or no to make it a bit more secure. So the first one that we have is owners can manage group membership request in My Groups. So within the My Groups portal, if you select yes, then the owners can manage the group membership on their own. They don't have to raise a help desk call for that. So if you go into your account and say myaccount.microsoft.com/groups, here you can see all the groups that you own, the groups that you are a member of. And if it is an open group, you can join those groups, you can leave the groups. So the groups I own, I have 6 groups that I am currently having, including the ones that we have just created, UK Finance Team. We also created ID users. Now groups I am in 2 other groups. And now I can pick and choose if it is a help desk one. And I can delete if I am on the owner for that. And I can see the members and I can see the ownership. So I'm the owner, so I can even remove myself as the owner. I can add another one. So you have full control. So you don't have to go into the portal. So this is for a non-administrative user. Say, for example, you have a user who is an owner of a particular group. Do you want to have these kind of permissions being assigned so that they can manage their own groups? So that's the option that we have over here. So you can either go with yes or no. So owners can manage group membership request. Maybe yes in my organization. So it's up to you guys. Now the second one is restrict user ability to access groups features in My Groups. So if you don't want to have any of these things coming up, and if you want to restrict that, you can click on yes. But in my case, no is good. Now the next option that we have is users can create security groups in Azure portals, API or PowerShell. I don't want the users to be creating groups, so I stick with no in my case. Similarly, I don't want users to be creating Microsoft 365 groups. And if I say no to that, that means that the users can create their own teams and all kind of groups on their own if they're used to that. You will be taking away the powers that they are quite used to. But if you're new to Microsoft 365, you can set the scene from the get-go and the users will be having the same behavior. And you will be in control as to what happens regarding users and groups in your tenant. So let's click on save for the group settings to be saved. Now, expiration is kind of a new feature. It's been around for a while, but it is something new into Microsoft 365. The idea here is that whenever you create any kind of groups, especially Microsoft 365 groups, which spin up Teams and SharePoint and other workloads behind the scenes to make that group enriched, we don't want to have those groups lying around if they are unused. So if the groups are being created for a particular project and the project didn't kick off and it just goes lying there, we don't want to have hundreds and hundreds or thousands of Microsoft 365 groups which are either empty or unused, or it was used for a while and then no one uses it for the last 6 months or for 1 year. So you could have a group lifetime set over here. So you could say my group lifetime is 180 days or 365 days. So from the get-go, when someone creates a Microsoft 365 group, it is set for 365 days or 180 days in my case. And the group owner will get an email 30 days before the expiration. So which means they will get an email 150 days after the group was created in this example, saying to renew that particular group if they want to keep using it. And if they don't do anything, they get another email in 15 days. And if they don't do anything, they get 1 day before the group expires. So if in all these 3 occasions, the group owner doesn't renew the group, then the group gets dropped, thinking that it is a group that is no longer required. But if it is an active group, you don't get any of these emails. So these emails are fired to the group owners only if the groups are inactive. If you have groups very active, going all healthy, then you don't get any of these notification emails. And as a group owner, you don't have to renew those active groups. Now, you can set an email address for any groups that doesn't have an owner. So this is really important why we should have owners for groups that we create. So if you don't have ownership for certain groups in your company, you can give an email address or a contact for those kind of groups and then ask that particular user to renew the group if that is required, or not to renew the group if it is no longer required. So this is normally an admin email address or an admin UPN. Now, enable expiration for these Microsoft 365 groups. Now, we want all of them to be in scope, or if you want to have only a selected set of groups to come under the expiration, then you can say selected. But in my case, I want all the groups to be evaluated. And if there are inactive groups, I want the group owners to get an email 30 days prior to the expiration, then 15 days, and then 1 day. And if nothing happens, the group has to be dropped. So let's click on save. Now, while that is saving, we have the next option, which is naming policy. So here we have 2 options. One is a group naming policy, by which, so let's click on that one. You can add a prefix and a suffix to the group name that you construct. So if you have some naming conventions within the company, in which you add a prefix like the location of the group or the team that is using that particular group, and a suffix, so you can add those options here. So you can just say add a prefix, check the box, and say I want to have an attribute. And in that case, I want to have department as the prefix. So if it is a group in IT, and it gives the example as finance, and then the name of the group, and then maybe you can go for the location. So if you add another suffix and add an attribute and say you want to have the country or the region or the state or the province, then that's good. So it will be department, the name of the group that the user specifies or the administrator specifies, and then it is followed by your country or region. So this is if you do want to have these kind of group naming policies. You can stick the prefix and the suffixes correctly. If you don't want to have an attribute, and if you want to have a string, then you can specify string, and you can give whatever the string that you want to have and go that fashion. Now, I'm not going to use any group naming policies over here. So let's go into blocked words. So here we can block certain words that needs to be prevented from creating Microsoft 365 groups. So if you don't want to have certain words to be in your Microsoft 365 groups, which are either reserved or which are not really good words to be used in an organization, you can download the CSV file, create a list of all the blocked words that you have, and then you can upload it over here. So those words will be banned while trying to create a group with that particular combination. So that's everything with groups. So let's go back into deleted groups and see whether the group that we deleted before has appeared. It hasn't. So it does take a while by the looks of it. The 365 backend is a bit slow. So if it lands in the deleted groups, it will be kept for 30 days. And then after 30 days, as it says over here, the groups will be permanently deleted. You will also have the option, as it is grayed out over here. Once we have the group over here, you can select the group and you can restore the group, just as we saw with the users. So that's all about groups and group settings. So group settings, we have already seen the general options and the expiration and the naming policies. Now let's have a look at devices. So these are all the devices that we have in the tenant. So when you click on the overview tab, it gives you a list of all the devices that we have. Now in my tenant, I currently have 5 devices. We have 2 preview features being lit up. We have 2 unmanaged devices as well. So if I click on all devices, it brings you a list of all the devices that I currently have. So let me expand that. So I have 5 of these devices. They are all enabled. There are 4 of them are Windows, and I have a 1 Mac machine. And the type of the join, most of them are Entra joined. So Entra ID joined, so which is enrolled into Entra ID. And I have one which is Entra registered, the user account, that is the owner of that particular machine, whether it is in MDM or not. So 3 of the machines are managed by using Microsoft Intune. The security settings are also managed by Microsoft Intune. Whether they are compliant or not is shown over here, the registered date and the last activity date. So these are all the devices that I have in the tenant. So these are all Entra ID joined machines, or if you have hybrid Entra joined machines, that will be listed over here as well. In my case, I don't have anything on premise, so we only have purely cloud machines. Now, if you click on device settings, you have a few options again that we can toggle on and off to improve the security posture. So the first one that we have is users may join devices to Microsoft Entra. Most of the case, you do want to have your users to be able to join to Microsoft Entra. Users may be able to register their devices. That is good as well. If you are more careful, you want to prompt the users to satisfy MFA while they are trying to register or join the devices. You can click on yes. So this kind of triggers all the users to be able to join or register the device, but in order to do so, they have to satisfy the MFA prompt. So they just want to verify the correct username, password, and the MFA combination. Now, the maximum number of devices per user, 20 is the recommended by default. I don't think any user will have 20 devices. So you can go for a sensible number, maybe 5 or 10, or maybe a custom number. So let me stick with 5. Now, local administrator settings, this is regarding local admin settings when a machine is joined into Entra, Microsoft Entra. So when you try and join a machine into Entra, what should be the behavior? So the first one is global administrator role is added as a local admin on all the devices. So you can say yes to that. It is a preview feature. So if it is set to yes, the global admins will be given local admin rights on that particular machine, which is good. And if it is something that you want to have, you can stick with yes. Now, registering user is added as a local admin on the device during the Entra join. I don't necessarily want my registering user to be given local admin rights. I want them to have standard admin rights. So if that is the case, you can say none. Or if you want to give the admin rights to a set number of users, you can click on selected and pick the members from the list. Or if you want to have it for all the users, you can go for all. So in my case, I'm going with none. Now we have an option for labs. So enable Microsoft Labs. So this is local admin password solution. So from Microsoft, so the lab solution in which we keep rotating the local administrator password so that we don't have a static password assigned for the local admin user account. This has been covered in one of my previous video in detail. I'll put a link in the description if it is something of interest, and I also link in the screen as well. So you'll have a card popping up somewhere on the top right. So if it is something of interest, please do check that out. So I have enabled labs already in my tenant, and that is why it is set to yes. By default, it will be set to no. So if you don't have labs enabled, and if you're not going to use it, then you can stick with no. And the last option that we have is restrict users from recovering the BitLocker keys for their own devices. We don't really want users to be having access to their BitLocker keys, coming more from a restrictive organization. But if you are happy with your users to be having access to the BitLocker keys, then you can say yes to that, and the users will be able to find the BitLocker keys if they so need. If you set it to no, then the users will have to call the help desk or the IT department, and they will have access to the BitLocker keys, and you can get the keys over there. And let's click on save. And if you do have BitLocker keys, then that will be shown over here. So you'll have a list of all the devices, and you will have the keys, and you can pick the keys from this particular location. Now, enterprise state roaming is something similar to user profiles, which we are used in the AD world, when which we are trying to save the profile information of the user. So the window settings, the app settings, and all of those things. By default, it is set to none. You can select yes for all. If you want to have the settings to be synced from one device to the other. So this is all about making it easier when the user has a new device. So if a user has a device and they have all kind of settings on the machine, they have a few apps that's been deployed, and you want to carry forward all those settings onto a new device. Say, for example, the device is up for renewal and the user is getting a brand new machine. If you are enabling enterprise state roam, it kind of saves the window settings that the user is aware of. Say, for example, Edge settings, favorites, all those kind of things, and app settings into the Azure blob, and it will pull down the settings from that Azure blob when they have a new device. It is not something that is heavily used in organizations, but if it is something that is of interest, you can always toggle all for giving the option for all the users, or if you want to have it for a select number of users, you can use selected and go with that. Let me select all in my case, and let me save. And the last option that we have is the local administrator password recovery. So this will show some information only if you have the lab solution enabled. So it is enabled in my tenant, as I said, and it's been covered in a different video. So if I want to have the labs password, the local admin password for my Cloudific-PC, which is my test machine, which is heavily used, I can click on show local administrator password, click on show, and copy the password, and you can use that one. And the passwords are rotated every 30 days, so it's not a static password that you can get hold of and keep using it. So it is something that is getting rotated on a periodic basis. But if you do want to have access to the local admin password, you come into the section and pick the device that you want and click on show local administrator password. And let's close that option. And within the activity, you have the audit logs, which is something that we have seen for users and groups. So it gives you a list of all the actions that has been performed on this particular tenant and the users and what the action was. So the service, the category, the activity, the date and time, and further details as to what has happened. So updating the device, it gives you the targets. Cloudific-PC is the one when which this particular change happened. Modified properties, if there is any. So there's a few property that's been changed. So the device ID has been updated, the device type has been updated, and so does the device trust type. It still shows Azure AD even though it's been renamed. Microsoft will catch up and change it to Entra ID at some point. So this is all about devices. So we have an overview, we have all the devices and the BitLocker keys, which is again taking you to the same section that we have seen. So let's close that off. Next one is applications. So let's click on enterprise applications. So within applications, we have two of those, enterprise applications and app registrations. These are quite heavy topic, but I'll give you a quick glance into it. So here we get a list of all the enterprise applications that you have within your tenant. So if you want to have applications using your company's single sign-on, say for example, you are trying to provision, I don't know, let me say, click new application over here, and let's pick an application that we have. There's hundreds of applications that's been integrated with Entra ID. So let's go for an application that we know. Let's say, for example, Salesforce, which is an HR application. So let's click on create. And what we want is by having this integration, we want our users in our organization or in our Microsoft 365 tenant should be able to log in seamlessly into the Salesforce application. So you don't have to have a separate set of username and password for Salesforce. You just have your organization Microsoft 365 ID or the UPN or the email address, and you can use that to seamlessly log in just as you would log into your mailbox. So let me just show that over here. So if I go into user details and if I click Outlook, so this is my own account. So by clicking on Outlook, I can seamlessly log into my Office 365 or Microsoft 365 mailbox. So similarly, in the same fashion, by clicking on a link within my apps, you should be able to log into Salesforce once it is fully integrated as an enterprise application. So that is the idea over here. So if I go into Salesforce and if I go into single sign-on, I need to set it up. And currently it is disabled. So I normally click on SAML. Then I have to fill in the details. I download the raw 64-bit one. So I need to click in edit and fill in these details, which is the entity ID, the reply URL, the sign-on URL. So these are required for the integration. And then I download the 64-bit certificate. I give it to the Salesforce team, or if it is managed by the same team, or if you're managing the same application in your company, you go into the Salesforce portal, upload the certificate, do the integration bits over there, and then come back and test it. So once it is done correctly, you can click on the test button and it will test to see whether the single sign-on is working correctly or not. Once the single sign-on is correctly done, you can go into users and groups and you can give your users and groups access over here. So you can pick your users and groups, say for example, IT department, for example, IT users, and you have to have a role. Now these role comes from the Salesforce. So you can say IT team has system administrator for the Salesforce application, and you can click on assign. And whenever any member of the IT users team log into the Salesforce app, they can seamlessly log in without any username or password once they are signed into any Microsoft 365 workload. So that's the whole point. So this is just not for the administrator. You can have normal access for the users as well. So any Salesforce users, HR people that you have in the company can seamlessly log in to the HR application. Similarly, you can have integration with any number of applications. Normally, a small to medium sized company will have maybe 20 to 30 applications being integrated tightly, and the large enterprises will have hundreds of those applications being listed. So that's all about applications, enterprise applications, and app registrations. App registrations is the one, again, similar to enterprise app. We are using those for creating secrets and using it elsewhere. Again, as I said, it's a beefy topic, so let's skip that one. And let's go into roles and administrators. Now, if you click on roles and administrators, here we see all the roles that we have seen so far. So these are all the roles that are out of the box in the Microsoft 365 tenant. So we have things like cloud device administrator, so limited access to managed devices. So this particular user who has been given cloud device administrator won't have any other rights. So these are our back roles, role-based access controls. So depending upon the role that you are given, you get the rights. So there's no way by in which you can bypass those controls. But you can have admin rights to more than one workload at the same time without being a global administrator. Say, for example, if you are managing Exchange administrator, you can give Exchange administrator rights along with another one. Say, for example, you're also managing SharePoint, for example. So let's go down into S, and you will have a SharePoint administrator role. So you can give more than one role to a user, and you can also make him part of the global administrator role, which will give them full access. So let's see that in action. So let's go into users. Let's go into all the users that we have. And let's assume that we have created an admin role, an admin account for this particular scenario. So let's quickly create one. Click on add new user. Let's say Rose admin as the user principal name. And let's give it a display name of Rose. And let's say admin account. And give a password and make the account enabled. Go into the properties, set the location at least to United Kingdom so we can assign a license if need be, although admin accounts doesn't need a license. Now we can create or add the user into the particular group that we want. We don't want any at the moment. We are looking for roles. Now here we can specify if Rose is managing Exchange Online and he's also managing SharePoint, but we don't want to give him global admin rights, you can just selectively give those roles. So two of them should have been enabled. So let me just go back. Maybe I didn't select that. There you go. And we can review and create. So this particular admin account will have access to both Exchange Online and SharePoint Online, but not to OneDrive or Teams or any other workloads. OneDrive maybe because it's SharePoint, but no other workloads will be able to be accessed by this particular user. So that's the concept over here. So we were in roles and administrators. So this is administrative units. So this is the case in which we are trying to segment the administrative rights onto a subset of users. So think of the scenario. So rather than giving user administrator role, which gives you rights to administer all the users in your tenant, let's pick up a scenario in which you have small offices spread around the region. Let's say you're a UK-based company and you have a small satellite office in Australia, and you have a local IT guy managing users and devices and groups and everything related to that particular office alone. And you don't want to give him user administrator role because that will give him user admin rights across all the users in your tenant, including the user base that you have in the UK, so the entire company. Whereas you want to have a segmented or a subset of users to be managed by this particular IT guy. So let's get that in action. So for that, let's click on add to create an administrative unit. So let's say Australia office users, and restricted because we don't want to have it in full tenant rights. So click yes to that. Next, click on assign roles. We want user administrator, and we want, say for example, Monica Geller to be the IT person in Australia. Click on review. So we are creating an administrative unit and we are giving user administrator rights to Monica Geller. And let's click on create. Now, this is just creating the bare bones. By just having the administrative unit is not going to do anything. So it is a restricted management and it has been assigned. Now we need to go into it and we need to add the users which are based in Australia so that Monica Geller can manage those users alone. So if I click on add members and if I have few users, say for example, I have Rachel Green and let's say Joy Tribbiani in Australia. If I select those over here, this means that Monica Geller will now be able to manage the user accounts of these two user accounts that I have, Joy Tribbiani and Rachel. But only those two accounts, not the other accounts that I have within the Microsoft 365 tenant. Now we can also add groups. So if you have any groups that's been used by the Australian satellite office, you can add the groups over here. So let's say click on new group and I can create a group or I can just add the groups. Click on add and I can say, I don't have any Australian ones. So let's quickly create one. Let's say a new group and security group, let's say Australian users. So that's a users who are based in Australia. And I could say dynamic user and ownership is myself. And I can construct a query and say that if the country is equal to, so the country attribute is equal to Australia, make this particular user a member of this particular group. Currently, we don't have anyone with a country set to Australia, but you get the gist of it. So let's say, so I have this particular group. Let me click on create. So we can use this particular group now in order to manage that particular group alone. Now, one thing to note is if I do add that particular group over here, Australian users, and that Australian users group have other users apart from Monica Geller, apart from the two users that I currently have over here, so Joy Tribbiani and Rachel Green, these two user accounts can be fully managed by Monica Geller. But if I add a group over here, which is taking a bit of time, it's appeared over here. If I add a group over here and this particular group have other users apart from these two groups, it doesn't mean that I can manage or that particular user, Monica Geller, can manage all the members in this particular group. So the notion over here is that you can only manage the group, but not the members in it. So you can manage this particular group, the Australian users, you can change the properties and all of those things, but you cannot manage the members in it. You can even change the membership. So you can add members into it. You can change the query and add the members. All those things are fine. But any members who are a member of this particular group cannot be managed by the administrative unit rights that you have given. You can only manage the group and also manage the users that you have explicitly given over here. So you can manage Joy Tribbiani and Rachel Green and the group itself, but not the members of the group if there are other groups apart from these two ones. So I hope that is clear. If you do have any questions and if it is a bit unclear, please do post it as a question in the comments and I will respond to this as soon as I possibly can. So that is administrative units. And the last one is delegated admin partners. So if you do have any partners that you are bringing in, or if you have long-standing relationship with any Microsoft partners who manages your licenses or gives you support, then those things comes up over here. Once the invitation has been accepted from the partner and once the relationship has been established. Now let's click on billing. Here we see all the licenses that we currently have in the tenant. So if you click on all products, so it lists all the licenses that we have and the numbers. So currently I have 25 E5 licenses. I have assigned 8 of them, 17 is available. Similarly, I have Teams and Microsoft 365 Business and Enterprise. So this gives you a snapshot of all the licenses that you have currently in the tenant and how many has been assigned and how many is free to be used. Now, licensing features, if you click on that one, you get all the features that's been supported by the license queue that you have purchased so far. We again have audit logs regarding licenses. So again, similar to the users and the groups, so audit logs are the same. So you get a log of everything that is going on regarding the licensing perspective in this particular pane and with the date and time and the category and the service and the activity that was going on, whether it was a success or a failure will be listed as well. Now let's go into settings. The preview hub feature gives you a list of all the new features or the recently released features from Microsoft 365, which has been enabled or disabled, which is available or not. So if you look at it, tenant overview, it came out in September 2020 and it is set to available. So the state is available. Enhanced searching and sorting of devices is on, and it came in 2020. There are quite a few other ones that came after that. We have a few in 2023 ones. Some of them are switched off and some of them are switched on. So the latest one that we have is from April 2024, which is just a month or two ago, which is enhanced what if evaluation experience. So if you want to have that, you can just turn the toggle box to on. Scenario monitoring, let's keep everything on. You get a bit of a detail as to what it is all about if you click on that one. So this is just a preview hub. So this is all the features that we have, whether you want to light up them or not. Now, domain names, this is the domains that we have within the tenant. So by default, you will have something.onmicrosoft.com, which you set up while setting up the tenant, and then you can add any other domains that you want. So these are brand domains for your organization. So clarific.training. If you have more domains, you are welcome to add any number of domains that you have. So you can click on add custom domain, give the name of the domain, click on add, go through the notion of verifying the domain by creating a text record or some kind of a DNS record for that particular domain in the public DNS zone. Wait for Microsoft to verify the existence of the record and then finish it, and then you will have the domain listed over here. Again, this was covered in one of the previous videos. I'll put a link to the description if it is something of interest, and I'll also put a card up in the screen if that is something that you want to try out. Now, clicking on mobility, it gives you the MDM platform that we currently have in place, and it will also give you the option to add any other MDM application. So currently we have Microsoft Intune. So if you click on that one, it gives you the MAM policy or the MAM scope and the MDM scope currently in place. So MDM scope is set to all, and again, Windows Information Protection is set to all as well. So MDM stands for, again, mobile device management. It started off as an MDM product. Now Intune is used for managing Windows devices, iPhone, iPads, Android devices, and macOS devices, even a bit of Linux as well. So it's a full-blown management solution from Microsoft, which is named Intune. It was rebranded as Endpoint Manager, then again was changed into Intune. So there's a lot of that goes on with the Microsoft Cloud platform. The look and feel of the portal that you have will change in due course, and the workflows will change. The options that you see will change. Sometimes the services will be changed. The rebranded into a different name, it will go back and forth. For example, Azure AD was rebranded as Entra ID. So the Entra ID was previously called Azure AD, Azure Active Directory, which was going in line with Active Directory as an on-premise product. So the cloud product was named Azure Active Directory. That further got rebranded to Entra ID, so which is the new branded name from Microsoft for their directory service. So to recap, we have gone through all the options that we have within the identity section in Entra ID. So let's just collapse all of those. And so these are all the options that we have gone through. We have gone through the overview, the users, the groups, the devices, applications, roles and admins, billings, and the settings. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop the questions in the comments, and I'll try my best to answer them. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe, and also check out the other videos that I have in the channel. I do upload videos on a daily basis around Microsoft 365, Intune, Azure, and Active Directory. So if those topics are of any interest, please do follow the channel and do come and join the community. Thank you.